Okay, I'm going to introduce a good friend of ours, and this person is a very good example of when ethics protection was no longer in place in the church. Okay? Trey Lotz was one of the most productive field auditors on the planet, and I think even during the time that some ethics conditions came down and all that, and it was like, where was the ethics protection? It was non-existent. Okay? So all I can say is, their loss is our gain.
Yeah.
So I want to give you one of the greatest auditors I know is Trey Lotz.
So great to be here. Particularly a treat to be here with my friend John and Bergia. I got in Scientology in 1969. A friend of mine told me about the books, and I bought all the books and I took them back, read them all, and went in and started a course. And John was running a little mission there that I got into, and he was just very impressive as an OT. I've been reading about OTs, but just a couple of little interesting things. You know, I was a very brand new person, obviously, and John could, you could take a book that you were reading, and he could spot what words you misunderstood because you left a little mass on the word. For some reason, that was real to me. And also, he'd give these little lectures on Friday night, and you just walk into the room in the afternoon, he'd look around and say, put out 28 chairs. And 28 people would show up, because people would put their mass in the room before coming. And then he said one time that he never ended off a lecture until everybody in the audience was exterior. So I don't mean to put pressure on you, John. You'll really enjoy his talk later. About 3 years ago, I connected up with Pierre, and I asked him to audit me on the L's. I'd always wanted him, but I never really had the money for him. And so he did that. He audited me on L11. We got a good comedy offer to train me on doing the L's. And so when he came out to LA, he finished my L12 and L10, and also trained me on how to deliver the L's. And I thought it was a fascinating technology. Of course, I understood a lot of it. A lot of the techniques are not unknown. You know, listing and nulling, two-way com, OW, date locate. You know, there's some new and different techniques that are not anywhere else on the bridge. And there's some interesting data in the L's material that LRH wrote. But it isn't like there's a lot of data. There's rundowns of what you're supposed to do. But all of the research that the L's were based on all goes back earlier. Also, I found the L's a little mysterious. And that's not an untypical reaction. Many people I've audited kind of come out of session and go, wow, that was really great. And they're talking to somebody else in there, and he says, no, what are we doing here? What was this all about? You know, or you talk to people who had their L's, and you say, yeah, they were great. I can't remember a thing about them, you know. and it's almost hard to find anybody who does remember anything about them. Well, there's an interesting reason for that. One of the things you blow on the L's is valences. Well, one of the things that a valence is something that knows more than you do. It knows better than you do. And that's why you use it. So when you blow it, you blow all that knowingness. That's true. But see LRH pushing. You can, the basic tech underlying the L's kind of really goes all the way back to the early 50s, where even in fundamentals of thought, where it always talks about games and no games. We have allies and opponents and teammates and opponents and enemies, and that's really the basis. See, he was sort of onto that as a real key piece of data. And even at that time, like if you understood game theory, you understood, you were for something, you were against something. There's things you could grant beingness to. There's things you couldn't grant beingness to, didn't want to. Things you were trying to block, people that were trying to block you. When you didn't want somebody to win or they didn't want you to win. See, this really ties in with all you can see this is all audited on the grades too, because you're not in common with people that are opponents. You don't want to be in common with enemies. You have problems with people you're opposing, and people who oppose you have a problem with you. Blocking, same thing. And who do you have secrets from? Your opponents. You don't want them to know. So they don't. And also people that you're unwilling to help, or people that you're willing to help. So when you're running help processes, like how could blank help you? How could you, identities that you're trying to be, identities that you're trying to help when you're running help flows, you're running off any old games that you've got that are residual, that are getting in the way of your being in present time and doing what you're supposed to be doing. Also, any overt is an effort to solve a problem. So if you've got problems with somebody, you're going to be committing overts and having withholds. And then, that's the problems grade, of course, then ARC breaks. LRH tells an interesting little story about ARC breaks. He says, these really severe ARC breaks, the one that just really fries your ass, He says it's like the guy's there, and then out of the gloom comes this big ocean liner-sized piece of charge, and it kind of moves in silently, and you just touch the edge of it, and you go like that. And when you assess it, ARCU, and okay, that's an enforced reality, it moves back out into the night. And that's how he describes what an ARC break is you're like just catching the edge of one of these GPMs. And a surfax where it was considered at one point that you were clear when you handled your surfact, because that was the present time lock of your present time GPM. That was the GPM that was affecting you in present time, was your surfact. See, so he was really pushing in this direction. And I did the briefing course, and you'd follow this sequence of development, and then around 1960, 61, he got into goals, and then goals auditing, R212, and many of you here went through that. I was talking with Mary about that, and audited on R212 and some of these other processes that developed out of that. It was 62, 63, 64. By 65, it just sort of disappeared, because that was the end of the tape series. Everything after that was confidential, the R6 tapes and the R6 bank and clearing course, and that was all confidential. So he said, well, where did all of this GPM research go to? Was it just abandoned, or did it just kind of end up as OT2 or OT3 or the clearing course? Well, after LH did all that, in 1970 he wanted to develop a rundown that would allow people to boom orgs. He wanted to have executives who could push an intention down the line and make things happen. So he took all of this research that he'd done on the GPMs, and he extracted out of that the L's tech. His original intention for the GPMs section of the bank, because there's a bullet around the title. He says that your case is like you do your grades, you go clear, you handle your OT case, your NOTS case. then you handle your GPM bank. And he says on the, or it says on the, in the ELS material that the ELS material is taken from OT 9 through 15, and that was the intention, was to, once the person had all of their OT case out of the way, that you could now handle your GPM track. Now this is different than your N-gram bank or your R6 bank, which you handle over on the bridge. These things are still there. So, GPMs. I'd always, just taking that regular definition, the person has a goal and they have a problem and they develop some mass. But it didn't explain a lot to me. And so what I decided to do, because I got so curious about this tech and what was happening and why, that I went back and I started rereading all the GPM stuff. And you can see a lot of the things, knowing the LSAC, you can see a lot of the areas that he took stuff from. Out of these, like at one point he'll say, yeah, when you really get the item, you get the meter will blow down. If it doesn't blow down, you don't have the item, And he says, yeah, when you really want to blow one of these things, the needle goes very free. So, you have to remember in 1963, 1964, there were no laws of listing and nulling. And that's why some people got in trouble listing goals. And there was also no FNs, no releases. So by the time all these technical things had been worked out, and he revisited his earlier research, which LRH has done quite a lot. He's gone back and he's kind of brought it into the present technical environment and figured out a rundown on how to run this. But a GPM, it's a mass that accumulates after the postulation of a goal resulting in problems. Now here's the real key thing that made me understand it. These problems are not the problems of postulate, counter-postulate. They're identity, counter-identity. A GPM is an identity versus an identity. There is a postulate and a counter-postulate, but that's junior, that's embedded in the identity. So when you're handling your GPM bank, you're handling your identities. Now, I'll read, there's a real good explanation here. I'll read you a little bit from this tape here. It's called Goals, Problem, Mass, in February of '63. He says he makes a postulate, he becomes an identity to make the postulate stick. And in the process of doing that, he is opposed by various elements, out of his own imagination or the determination of others, which causes an opposition identity to materialize. The presence of the opposition makes the person believe that to accomplish his goal, he must now become another identity. And this new identity gets a new opposition, which causes him to have a new identity.